Grant, it's so nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, Kevin.
I've really been looking forward to this. I really appreciate you taking the time to join our Building Builders podcast. I think this should be a really great chat.
Yeah, I'm happy to be here. I always love talking about this project.
Awesome. So Grant, maybe just to start things off, if you could share with myself and our listeners a little bit more about, yourself and kind of leading up to being a part of this project.
So I'm currently the Chief Capital Officer for the Windsor-Detroit Bridge Authority. So we're the entity that is responsible for overseeing the design and construction of the Gordie Howe International Bridge. So I came over to this project just about 7 years ago. I've always worked in the region and gone to school in the region. So born in Windsor, still living in Windsor, but I spent quite a bit of time working on the Detroit side of the river also. So I've got a bachelor's and master's in environmental and civil engineering from the University of Windsor. So I've always been interested in construction since a young age. And I was working over in Detroit, and the opportunity came up to come over and work on this great project. And so I took that opportunity. I've been crossing the existing bridge and tunnel my entire life with relatives on both sides of the border. So having an opportunity to work on this once-in-a-generation project was just too much of an appeal not to come over here.
It sounds like such an interesting project. I've got to ask you a quick question. It's so interesting that it's crossing the border. Are you do you go through customs a number of times a day, or is it once you're on the job site, you're okay and you don't have to go through customs? How does that work?
So we've got construction crews on either side of the border, but people like myself and many others that are involved in the oversight of the project do cross on a regular basis. So if I've got to go to a meeting in Detroit or see something on the Detroit side, you've got to go through customs and clear and go over and work there. We have quite a few staff that cross over any given day. And interestingly enough, once the bridge is connected, even before traffic comes through, they will have to establish a customs border. So we'll have workers crossing through to finish it, because you can't have the connection without the border services set up on either side.
Right. Yeah, no, that's super, super interesting. You must have to bid that into the project. I could imagine just the extra delays in the border. Or maybe you guys all have Nexus and you're able to fly through.
Many people do have Nexus. I think the border agencies know the project's going on, and the Bridging North America, our private partner, knew coming in that it was a cross-border project. But labor, a large portion of the workers are located in either Canada or the U.S. But we do have, like I said, management staff and people that just have to be on either side for any given meeting or an inspection. So it does, having an international project, especially a project of this side, does pose its own challenges, but we've been able to work through those over the last 5 or 6 years.
Yeah, I bet it's been quite interesting. Grant, so you have a background in environmental engineering, if I'm correct?
My degree's in environmental engineering, but the program I went through was a heavy civil program. So I specialized in environmental, but I've got that fundamental civil engineering background also.
Did the environmental engineering background come in handy with this project?
It did. So when I initially came to this project, I was the environmental director. And, you look at this and it's, a bridge project fundamentally is
right.
That's what's in the title. It's really 4 projects in one. We've got 2 ports of entry, we've got the bridge, and we've got a connection to Interstate 75 on the U.S. side. With working in those different jurisdictions and having these ports of entry, there are all kinds of environmental challenges that I've been able to support and work through, from land acquisition and cleaning up historic contamination, permitting, and just even getting air permits to operate the heating equipment on both campuses required environmental expertise. So it's really come in handy. And I've worked on both sides of the border. So I'm a licensed engineer in Ontario and Michigan. So frankly, this project was an ideal fit for all of the experience I had coming into it.
Were there any major decisions that were affected because of the environmental conditions considered by the WDBA?
So, the initial work on this project started in the year 2000. So there have been many studies and a lot of work that was done even before we let the contract for this P3. So in 2009, leading into early 2010, environmental studies were completed on both sides of the border. Mm-hmm. So doing a cross-border environmental study involved Ontario, Michigan, Canadian federal government, and the U.S. federal government. So very comprehensive environmental studies were completed with 450 conditions identified between the two of them. So a number of environmental requirements were incorporated into the project. One of them includes not having the piers for the bridge in water. So one of the reasons this will be the longest cable-stayed bridge in North America is that the piers are located completely on land. That's partially to minimize the impact to the waterway from an ecological point of view, but also to protect against navigation hazards. So the ships can go by without any structures in the water.
Wow, and it's 2.5 kilometers long, right?
In total, with the main span being just over 800 meters. So the main span on a cable stay governs the height of the towers, and really that's the measure of the size of a cable stay bridge. But 2.5 kilometers total, because you've got to get from the Canadian port of entry to the U.S. port of entry.
Can you just really quickly describe a cable stay bridge versus a suspension bridge, for example?
So the cable stay bridge has that distinct sail shape to it. So the cables are at an angle from the tower down to the bridge. So you end up with a much taller tower, but you've got that iconic, that really attractive look of the angled cables. With a suspension bridge, you will still have piers that hold up the suspension cable, but then you'll have very heavy anchor piers at the end. In this case, because we have a cable stay bridge, they were able to construct the back of the bridge, the back span, before heading over water. So that's one of the benefits is you can build from the tower out.
Was that one of the main benefits or main reasons to go with this type of bridge? Or is it aesthetics? Is it environmental motivations?
So fundamentally, when we bid this project, all of the bidders could offer up a suspension bridge or a cable stay bridge. Mm-hmm. They all presented a cable stay bridge. We suspected that'd be the case because it really comes down to economics. At this length, it was just more economical to construct this type of bridge. But as a consequence, you do get a very attractive, iconic shape to both the towers and the stays.
Seeing as you've been on this project, I'm sorry, I forget, it was either 7 or 8 years now. Have you seen a lot of changes? You were talking earlier about, all the different environmental impacts and conditions that were out there. Has much changed on the project since it started?
Oh, it's been significant changes on the project. When I started, we were still executing some preparatory contracts. They're typically are known as early work contracts to move utilities, to prepare land, put some wick drains in portions of the land on the Canadian side to encourage settlement. So when I first came here, there were empty land. There were also buildings on portions of the land that had to be removed in preparation for construction. So it is, the landscape on the two ports of entries has changed significantly since I started here through the demolition and all the preparatory work. But it's amazing to see the difference, and it's always fun to go back and look at those aerial photos and see what we started with and what it looks like now.
I bet. Yeah, the aerial photos must be amazing. How much equipment is involved on both sides of the border for a project like this?
Dozens and dozens of pieces of equipment. So in the case of this project, the Bridging North America, our private partner, will have cranes, a couple dozen cranes at various locations to move things around. But then you get all the equipment that the subcontractors bring in. So you've got dump trucks, you've got excavation equipment. It changes on a daily basis, but there is tremendous amount of equipment and thousands of people involved too to construct something this size.
So back to this like cross-border project, or the fact that it's cross-border, does all of the equipment originate on each side of the border and then stay on that side? I guess similar question with supplies. Do many supplies come from one country and move into the other, or are they sourced in their own countries?
So the equipment itself would come from, it comes from various sources, but typically when it lands on either the U.S. or the Canadian side, that's where it resides for the duration of the project. They don't ship major pieces of equipment across the border. Currently, we have two very large cranes at the tip of the bridge being constructed over the water, one on the U.S. side, one on the Canadian side. Same with the tower cranes. There's individual cranes. That kind of equipment usually is just placed in one country or another. As far as materials go, steel on this project can only be sourced from Canada or the U.S. We got a waiver to Buy America because the Federal Highways is involved on the project on the U.S. side, and typically they have a Buy America requirement. In this case, we could buy steel, or B&A could buy steel from anywhere in Canada or the U.S., and many other supplies can come from multiple sources. So for the bridge, for example, the steel for the bridge is all coming from Can-Am, a factory located near Quebec. And then they've got a number of other satellite factories, but the primary factories in Quebec, and that's all shipped to the site. But the precast concrete panels for the bridge are being cast in just outside of Detroit. So we've got an example of the bridge where you've got materials coming from both sides of the border and being placed.
Wow. Sounds like a huge amount of complication. And same with the labor. I know we talked about, does are workers or employees moving from one side to the other? Is it most of the labor would stay on their own side or in their own country? Yeah.
Most of the labor will stay in their own country. They use unionized workforces on both sides, so the locals will supply the trades as needed.
Right.
And that is largely separated.
How does weather affect a construction project like this? It must be just dreadfully cold in the wintertime.
So around here, it can be dreadfully cold. It can thaw. We've got a variety of, depending on the winter, we've got a wide variety of weather. The contractor uses something called a winter schedule that takes into account that there are going to be a number of days during any given week during winter months that they can't be productive. And the biggest impact to weather right now on the project is on bridge construction. So once the wind picks up, the cranes cannot operate, and without the cranes operating, you can't progress on construction. But that's been factored into the overall schedule.
Right. So does the project kind of sit idle for a week at a time if you get a storm blowing through?
So you would have portions of the project. So you might not have bridge construction on the front of it, but you will still have work going on. So they'll just move the crews to activities that aren't wind critical. In the case of the buildings at this point, the buildings will all be enclosed going into the winter. So internal work can continue. Obviously, concrete work gets suspended for a period of time because it's very costly and somewhat risky to place the concrete and make sure you get the quality that we're requiring.
I've I've come from a much smaller construction background in landscaping and paid a lot of attention to weather, but probably not as much as it would impact this. And I'm curious, what would be the longest expected delay due to wind? Have never had to watch wind that closely.
We've never had anything, say, going into a week or more, but it really depends on if we get certain conditions around here, you might get wind for a period of days. That's the importance of having a reasonable winter schedule, is that over the duration of the winter, they've predicted that there'll be X number of days per week that they can't work, and it all averages out. And then during the summer, similar in the summer, you predict having some days where you're rained out, but over the duration, especially a project this long, it works out.
So what happens when the bridge is completed? Are there standard maintenance schedules to monitor through its lifetime?
The bridge is going to have an intelligent monitoring system. So some aspects of bridge performance will be monitored on an ongoing basis. The tension of the stays can be inspected. And a bridge like this has a biannual inspection requirement. So one of the interesting design aspects of this bridge, it's got fracture critical beams installed into it. So if you have the very unlikely chance that you've got a crack in, say, an edge girder, there are other structural members that will take on that load. Because of that, it only has to be fully inspected every 2 years. But we're talking about a full inspection of the bridge by somebody that's licensed to do that. And that'll be done likely from both MDOT, because the bridge is certified to meet design in 2 jurisdictions, as well as Transport Canada.
Wow. In similar kind of topic, we see that there's just a ton of resources on the website about the project timelines, studies, just about everything. Is this the most transparent project you've ever been part of?
Oh, absolutely. So in addition to the information that's on the website, our communications and stakeholder group has a quarterly meeting, one on the U.S. side and one on the Canadian side, and those are public meetings. All of the obligations for related to the environmental studies I mentioned earlier, those are all being tracked. And our team is out there in the community all the time. We've got a $20 million community benefit program that is specifically designed to compensate local communities on either side of the border. So really the areas that are directly impacted by construction. And the community benefit program is an award-winning program. So we really think that the outreach and work with the communities is unique and done really, really well on this project.
Do you happen to know how many employees or jobs were created on this? It must have been hundreds.
So at this point, this summer, so we've been tracking this off and on. This summer, we peaked somewhere around 2,300 on site between the two sides. And I believe we've had over 10,000 people come through orientation training. So that means they could have come here and performed the job for a short period of time, or it's then been here a longer time. We just completed 10 million person hours worked.
Wow.
So it's a significant effort to complete a project of this size.
That's so incredible. Yeah, it's just amazing. Thank you so much for sharing all of this with us. I have one more question we always ask. Do you have a favorite piece of equipment?
I do, and I've learned to love it. The tower crane has become my favorite piece of equipment since working on this project. When you have a piece of equipment that can actually lift itself up and insert another section, and then build up, and it just by itself, it can just help construct itself. Combine that with the height of it, it's the tower cranes are at their top height right now of about 800 meters.
Wow.
And then you look at just that strike. It's a relatively simple concept for a tower crane, but it just perform such a significant role on the project. And then you've got the poor operator that's got to climb up they don't have to climb up from the bottom. They reach it from partway up the tower. But when they've got to climb up into that the booth and run that thing for the day, it's an amazing role to have. The tower operator, crane operator, everybody respects them because they're the one that's delivering that material. Everybody at the top of the tower needs to do their job.
Have you ever been able to go up one before?
I have not. I don't know if my legs would carry me up that far, and I don't know if I'm pretty good with heights, but I don't know if I'm that good with heights.
Yeah, similar. Huge amount of respect for those operators. I'm not sure if I could get myself up there. Well, this has been great. Thank you so much for joining us again on the Building Builders podcast. Really excited to share this with all of our followers, and appreciate your time today.
Yep, anytime. I'm happy to talk about this project. It's one of my favorite things to do is talk about all the great things on this project.
I bet. So much to be proud of. It's awesome. Thanks again.
Thank you.